guys, I'm here with Val from Distance Between Planets with all threes instead of E's. He has an Instagram channel and a YouTube channel, and he is a self-taught astrologer, I suppose I should say, and psychic dude who's really particularly interested in, or especially interested in Eris, the planet Eris. So today we're going to go through all of that, and he's going to tell us like why that's super important and what's going on with that. So welcome aboard. Hey Val.
Hey, yeah. So we'll stay on track. I'll try to stay on track as I talk about this, because it's kind of overwhelming sometimes for me. But Eris is a dwarf planet. Okay, and it was discovered in 2005. So we went through a big wave of discovery out in the space beyond Neptune in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So for a long time, Pluto's out there. For a long time, Pluto was the only thing that we knew that was out there.
Well, and they demoted Pluto as a planet.
Yeah, Eris is why Pluto was demoted. Eris is the thing that demoted Pluto.
Right, because it's almost, you said it, I think it's something like 100-mile difference, or like they're almost like the same planet.
They're almost exactly the same size. Yeah, they seem to be very similar. And it also seems to fit a pattern in our solar system, or for whatever reason, that things seem to come in twos. So like, Uranus and Neptune, they look very similar. They're very similar in size. Jupiter and Saturn, very similar. Yeah. And out there in the trans-Neptunian realm, which is called the Kuiper Belt, kind of goes by a lot of different names, but Kuiper Belt is basically it. It's like, seems at first like it's sort of like a reiteration of the asteroid belt, but it's actually much bigger, and it's got these little mini planets zipping around in it. And the biggest ones are Pluto and Eris.
That we know of so far. Wait till we discover more.
That we know of so far. Yeah. I mean, right now they're supposedly looking for what they call Planet 9, because right now there's 8 official planets, and it ends with Neptune. And then there's supposed to be one that's out there that's like 10 times the size of Earth. That's Planet 9.
Right. Nibiru kind of thing or something.
It could be like Nibiru. Yeah, it could be like Nibiru. If it's out there, then it's pretty far out, and it might end up kind of lining up with the Nibiru story.
Okay, so this is what makes me a little bit like, okay, so if Eris is only discovered in 2005, do you think it has had influence forever, or is it just now that because the consciousness of the collective has become aware of it, now we can kind of analyze its influence?
All right, here's a little picture, right? Is it coming up? There we go.
Okay.
That's as close as we've gotten so far to seeing it. And it's going to be a little while before we get a good picture of it. Answer to your question is, these things always have influence. I mean, so if you go back and you could look at a chart, astrological chart from 1,000 years ago, and you could see where Pluto's influencing something or someone, or you can actually see it. But when we discover it, it's
more impactful.
It kind of creates a little, it's like the antenna of humanity. The mind of humanity gets this little signal that comes through, and it starts to become part of the mind of culture. I try to find the right way to succinct way to explain it. It's that for thousands of years, Saturn was the furthest out planet that we knew of, right? So we had this system that had these planets that had a relationship that we thought was kind of eternal. Like we thought that there was a perfection, and Saturn was sort of the expression of the perfection of that structure. So the idea that there was anything else out there was like this huge rupture to that. And we're still in this transitional thing of actually finding out everything that's in the solar system to be able to reconstruct a model of what's out there that'll be permanent again or more permanent. So things are fluctuating each time we discover something new. It kind of brings in a new way of awareness, is the way I would put it.
Okay, so this, I just have to get this off my chest because this kind of pisses me off. Okay, like
Right.
there's a part, and I don't know how you'll, as an astrologer, how you'll move into this, but there is a part of my brain that gets like, it's not even that I don't believe that this stuff is real or that it actually does seem to, oddly enough, like be able to kind of, provide a framework of what's going on. It's just that it pisses me off that it does, because then I'm kind of like, okay, are we really in a video game then? And these are like the components of the, like, what does it mean that astrology works in some respect?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody understands how it works. And the way you just described it is, to me, that's a really good description. Could be just as valid as anything else. Is we're in a game, and these are like some key touchstones or something within the game. Could be it. I mean, it's. I tend to think that the planets are living beings. That's how I see it.
Okay.
And somehow they radiate this particular consciousness, and that's the energy of that planet, and then that's how it shows up in the chart, and we're meant to somehow be a part of that, that we're commingling in this environment. In the solar system, it'd be kind of like a terrarium where,
okay, so it's like the microcosm of the macrocosm, and I believe that too. Like, I think that the earth herself is like, I think we're like cells on the back of a dog. Like, I mean, I feel like the earth is a living being too, and we're part of her. So that
Earth
makes
is
sense
alive.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, how is it that like how did they determine what aspects these different planets basically influence or don't? Just observation over
But
long
I
periods of
think
time?
that we try to observe what's happening and draw a conclusion. It's an intuitive science, is kind of the way I could describe it. It's like we can't really prove empirically beyond a shadow of a doubt that this kind of subtle energy is real, or at least not yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, this is, I guess, it's just we tend to, we just look at it. Takes a while for stuff to sink in. So like, Pluto was discovered in 1930. We didn't really seem to get a really reliable handle on it, like to where it could be used really reliably and very well in a chart. It seems to me like it didn't really happen until the 80s.
So you're saying it took like, like over 50 years for us to kind of get a grasp of what aspects it actually meant, or not aspects. Yeah.
Yeah, in that case, yeah, it seems like fairly early on, people got a sense that it was probably the ruling planet for Scorpio, which is what it is. So there's a correlation between the sign Scorpio and Pluto, for example. There's Uranus became the ruling planet for Aquarius. Neptune became the ruling planet for Pisces. And Eris, I think, is the ruling planet for Libra. But it's a long way from even really entering the popular discussion, really, for the most part. It has barely been touched on. So
okay, so
go
like
ahead.
What do you think Eris is? Okay, so tell us the personality of Eris. Like, give us, so we know how she was found, and she is a she, I suppose, even though I've heard you say she has masculine attributes. So
Yeah. I mean, Eris is a goddess, and the planet is named after the goddess.
right.
The planets and the gods that they're named after aren't really the same thing, but the name kind of gives you like a toehold. You can kind of just barely kind of get a point of entry, and then it can show you what it is. So it's like Jupiter, right? It was the king of the gods. Jupiter is the biggest planet. And Jupiter has this kind of expansive, optimistic confidence about it. That's a big part of Jupiterian energy. But the actual energy of Jupiter is very different from the character of Jupiter or Zeus in myth. Totally, very, very, very different. Not much overlap. Jupiter as a planet, even though it is masculine, it has kind of this maternal side. I'm just using it as an example because most people know who Jupiter is or who Zeus is.
Right.
And so this naming is really, really important. But it is only kind of like an opening into it. Now, Eris is really unusual in that the name actually came from something that had to do with the reaction that people had to the planet. It took 1.5 years to get its name. It really, I mean, it was like a really strange political thing when it was discovered. I mean, because Pluto was really tiny, right? Pluto is really tiny. Every time we looked at Pluto, it kept getting smaller and smaller. And so for a long time, people weren't, the International Astronomers Union, the sort of, the official, wow, the official ruling body that decides on what's what in the world of like what gets a name and how things are defined. They kind of were not sure about Pluto because Pluto just kept shrinking and shrinking. Pluto's smaller than the moon. Originally, we thought it was like this big thing that was as big as Neptune or Uranus. And that was just the expectation that we had. And then the more we got to see it, the smaller it got and the smaller it got. So it was kind of hanging by a thread politically with this group of astronomers. And the people looking for Eris were looking for something that would be as big as those other planets. And they didn't find it. What they found was exactly the same, and that created like this huge dilemma, and they just dumped them. They just dumped both of them. They said they're not going to be.
Well, I've heard that there's a lot of stuff similar in size, which is why the demotion of Pluto, it's not just Eris. It was also because there's like, there was a lot of stuff, or it's almost like kind of like if you let that one be a planet, then it's a slippery slope. There's like that we could end up having tons of little planets.
Oh yeah. There's Quaoar and Sedna and a bunch of other ones that are out there. Yeah.
So, that's another thing that pisses me off. How is it that we just in 2005 found this? Like, I mean, the real answer is that we don't really have enough stuff pointed outwards. And you only have, one. Like I'm a big observatory freak. I go to a lot of, I've been to like Mauna Kea or the one in Hawaii, which I can't say the name of properly, and I always get corrected. So that one, and I've been to like Donald Observatory, like one in Phoenix and these things. So I've looked through like some of the biggest telescopes that you can pay to look through. And it's a very limited amount of looking out that happens actually when you really think of it. And that's a little bit weird too, considering all the ancient cultures up till now were super obsessed with the sky. So that's kind of weird.
Okay. Yeah, I don't let me think about that, because I mean, this is coming from Caltech. That's where the team is that's found a lot of the stuff that's out there. Mm-hmm. And as far as I could tell, they really put a lot of energy into looking out there. I mean, they were coordinating between several different telescopes. I think the biggest problem is that those things are really tiny and they're really, really far away. So it's like, I feel like there actually has been a lot. I mean, there could always be more, but it seems like there was actually been a lot of energy put into looking for these planets at least. Yes, for these planets. Yeah, because there's a lot of glory in it. There's a lot of prestige. Yeah, there's a lot of prestige in it. And it's like kind of one of the few things where, there isn't immediately like a $ thing you can attach to it, but that the prestige is really alluring. And so you want to be the country that has the institute that found the planet. Yeah,
but I mean, even if you look at there's not that many institutes that do that in relation to other things that we do, right? And it's also
that's true.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I just kind of mean like in relation to other things. And I also feel like it's like for instance, the only what is it's the new James T. Webb telescope supposed to be going up there, but like right now, like what is the name of the big telescope that I am forgetting that like
Hubble.
messed up? The Hubble. Hubble's like the
Yeah.
only telescope we have outside of the Earth's atmosphere. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, and you think like I used to think like, oh, like all these satellites we're looking out too, like they're looking in, they're doing stuff in, like there's not a lot of stuff that's pointed out. So it's always interesting when you find these things where it's like, oh yeah, this asteroid just barely buzzed past Earth yesterday, y'all.
Well, that's true. Well, a lot of what's happening with the asteroids is that the angle that they're coming in, when they're pointed directly at the Earth, it's hard sometimes if they're coming in straight like that, it's hard for people to see them until they get close. It's the angle that they're traveling at.
Yeah.
So it's when something's coming right for us, like ironically enough, we have a harder time seeing it until it's getting closer. I mean, we're just a lot more vulnerable than we think. I mean, and like I think when it comes to the discovery of planets, that there's kind of a weird, there could always be more energy and more money going to it, but there's kind of a weird, like old timey, like competition that goes on between countries and schools to actually have a name attached to something.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't like it's
So as far as astrology is concerned, though, we still consider Pluto of significance and now Eris.
Well, yeah, I guess here's the thing: is that Pluto is very much about mystery and hidden things and digging into stuff and unlocking the hidden power that's inside of things. That's kind of one of the those are the basic kind of motifs that are associated with the energy of Pluto, or the awareness that's attached to Pluto, right? And so we can see really huge shift, like when Pluto was discovered, that's when quantum mechanics really came on as a big thing, right? And pretty soon after that, we made atom bomb. And that's that same idea that you can go deeper and deeper into something and crack it open and get the hidden power that's inside of it. So that motif has been really strong in culture because Pluto was like the furthest out thing.
Right.
It as that thing with the longest orbit, and it's also holding a harmonic resonance. It kind of has a geometric relationship where 2 orbits of Pluto equals 3 orbits of Neptune, and they correlate in a way to each other where gravitationally they're pulling and pushing on each other, so they have an orbital resonance. So even that little tiny thing is actually holding Neptune there. It's helping hold the harmony of the spheres together. And I think that's what tells you it may have a rulership. Sorry, I'm going to drift around. It's hard to, every time I think
what about Pluto and Eris? Like, what's their relationship to one another?
Okay,
like,
Pluto and Eris, I think, have a really, really intense, amazing, fraught, difficult relationship with each other. It's very, very dynamic. Pluto likes to hold on to power. Pluto likes to hold on to things. It's Pluto, like we're culturally, we're in the grip of Pluto. And Pluto is really about concentration, really, really intense concentration of power. And so when you look culturally at the dynamic that's happening, especially that we're very aware of in the United States, where you've got like this very few people that have extreme amounts of wealth and power, and then there's everybody else. That's an awareness of kind of the shortcomings or limits of Pluto that's really coming to the forefront in society right now. And I think a lot of what's driving it is Eris, because I think Eris is, I think what Eris is doing is it's kind of like a complement to Pluto. They make a pair. They function together as a complement. And I actually think that Eris is the masculine one and Pluto is the feminine one, if you had to pick genders for them.
Oh, interesting. Even though they're named contrary. Okay, so explain what you think Eris does, because 2005, that's going to be cell phones or smartphones, basically.
Yeah, and social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Eris is primarily, it's about sharing. I think that's the first thing that I would say. I mean, it's there's a complex archetype comes along with each planet. And some of it is beyond language. Some of it communicates visually. There's feelings and things that are difficult to articulate. But I think if I had to sum it up in a word, I think the first thing is sharing. And it's a really particular kind of sharing, right? Because there's an Aquarian form of sharing, which is more like just dumping stuff out freely to people. And Eris is a really different, it's a very much more involved, almost personalized kind of sharing, where you offer something up to the other, whoever they are, and you wait to see, you want to see the reaction. You're invested in whether it's liked or not. So it's a lot about this, right? The like or the unlike.
Yeah, the validation from outside of yourself.
Yeah, that would be like the downside to Eris, I think, would be over-reliance on the external validation.
Right.
But I think that the upside to it, I mean, it's coming in at a certain time, right? There's a reason for us to discover it at this time. It's been 16 years, but that's like a blink in the world of astronomy. I mean, that's not much time. And astrology is not much time. So it's new. And I think that social media is one of the purest expressions of it. And social media we're always finding out it's more powerful than we thought it was, right? I mean, it seems to be just having this very comprehensive overhaul of society is coming out of the existence of social media, which started out kind of as this trivial thing. It's like in 2005, people thought of it as like a thing kids would do mainly or something, or young adults where they'd want to share pictures of themselves and make themselves look attractive and want to get positive nods from people. But somehow that same system is like, it just switched into being this massive investigation of ethics, and people talking about, what's right politically or what's wrong. And I don't know, something about that seems very profound. So I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And so you think that, so basically you think we've now shifted into the age of Eris in kind of a way?
Yeah. It seems like the time periods, each one seems to last about 75 years on average. Right. So Uranus was found, right? And then 65 years later, Neptune was found. I think it was like 74 years later, Pluto was found, and then 75 years later, Eris was found. So I think we've got, another 60 60 years, and we'll probably find something else. Yeah.
Okay. And so, okay. So I liked the story that you told about, like tell us the Greek mythology story real quick, like of who Eris is and like why that's important to it. Cause she was an exposer of like a wedding that was all messed up and.
Yeah. Okay. So Eris is kind of credited with creating the Trojan War. I mean, that's the idea, is that she was the force behind the whole thing with Helen of Troy being taken, became a result of what Eris did. Because Eris wasn't invited to a wedding, and that she was supposedly very spiteful, and that she played this mean trick on the gods that created this huge disagreement that started the Trojan War. Now, I think that is mostly kind of like a frame-up job on Eris. What they overlook is that who was getting married at the wedding, right? So Zeus was orchestrating this whole thing, and Zeus was orchestrating a wedding between Peleus, who was like one of his like half mortal
sons,
grandsons. I think it was a grandson maybe, and then Thetis was his bride. And the reality is that it was a coercive thing, that actually Thetis was captured. She was captive. She was not actually into being married to this guy. And there's a whole gigantic backstory on that Thetis was herself probably she was probably Zeus's ex-wife. that she was a sea goddess or a sea nymph, and that symbolically, she kind of represents the patriarchal system that was headed up by Zeus. Got the jet coming by again. The patriarchal system that headed up by Zeus that was trying to supplant sort of an earlier form of goddess worship in the Mediterranean is really what it comes down to. And Zeus didn't want Eris at the wedding because Eris, in his view, was probably going to speak up and say that something was wrong with it. She would be creating discord, right? So discord. So chaos and discord, it all depends on your viewpoint. So it's chaos from the standpoint of somebody that wants to orchestrate and manipulate sort of total control. So much like kind of what we have happening in the world, right? It's like there's a feeling suddenly, it's like all over the world, everybody's suddenly aware that there's like a really small number of people that are completely in control of all these different rules that we're supposed to be living by, and it's way less than 1%. I mean, it's 0.0001% or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's kind of a similar thing to that, is that she's got this reputation as a troublemaker, but in reality, what may be happening is that she wants to examine the ethics of,
like, an exposer.
Yeah, in the case of the myth, what she did was she basically introduced a meme into this social event, put a message on an apple that said "to the fairest," and tossed it into the party from the outside. That's what happened. And so the people there all wanted to be the fairest. Every single person there wanted to be the fairest. Every single god that was at this wedding reception, at this feast, wanted to be the fairest. And then it kind of got boiled down to just these three goddesses, and everyone else was afraid to pick. No one would pick who's the fairest between the three of them, because everyone's afraid of the wrath of the other two who were going to be chosen.
That's such an amazing analogy for right now. I mean, first of all, even like the direct symbolism of like Apple, and we have like, it's like one of our big tech companies, and then the who wants to be the fairest of them all, like that is social media in general, so it's such an ego play. It's
it is though. I think I do want to say that I don't see social media as a negative thing, and I feel like it's actually created a lot of personal growth with people, really, because we're learning how to kind of see I think learning how to see yourself the way that other people see you is a big part of the energy of Eris.
Yeah.
And so there's a negative side to it that's like a narcissistic thing, the way you just explained it, right? Which is like that idea of these people all wanting to be the fairest and like, look at me, right?
Which honestly, I feel like, I don't know if it's just my personal experience, but I feel like in the infancy of it, that's kind of what it was set up for. I mean, I think like one of the big predecessors to Facebook was Hot or Not. Like that was the name of it. Are you hot or not? And like it was like a rating of, and like that was one of the things that influenced apparently Facebook. But I do think it's like it's maybe going into its adolescence now, and people are starting to realize, oh, whoa, like what I put on here is on here forever potentially. So
yeah, that's a big thing.
Awareness.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that system of the habit moving from hot or not, right, as you like what you just said, which is 100%, I think that's an Eris thing. That's like the kind of low vibrational expression of the same energy that somehow it moved to, people's like Twitter and people's just random things that are, especially digging up the old things, right? We see that very often. Like you said, there was a time before people really understood that this stuff was forever.
Yeah.
And that they would dig up a little statement that somebody made, and then it would be politically analyzed in a way that perhaps the person was never really thinking, or it may reveal like an inherent bias in the person's thinking that they weren't aware of.
Well, and I also sort of always kind of think of it in terms of like I when I had this whole like, I got Facebook fatigue like in 2012, and I quit it, and I wrote this big article about like why I was leaving, and it was kind of one of the things I was using as my point was that like I reserve the right to feel something and think something and believe something right now, and then later on down the line have new information that comes in and change my mind. Like I want to be able to be a molding, flexible, open-minded person throughout my life. Like just because I believe X today doesn't mean that I have to believe X when I'm 80. And and I don't want to necessarily always be accountable for my ideas.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe people are learning to be a little bit more, to allow a little bit more grace, and forgiveness as this thing progresses. It's like, I remember like 10 years ago, right? There used to be a lot more just very, very nasty, volatile exchanges online that would blow up. And it seems like it's somewhat lessening, that people are becoming a little bit more compassionate, or a little bit just having more perspective on what you just said, that everybody changes over time. That I think that there is a little bit more of that coming in. But there is the record, which is kind of similar to like the Akashic records.
Yeah.
It's like the Akashic records are being made this real thing on Earth now, in the form of these clouds of information.
My big thing with the internet at large, not just social media, is like I feel like it's modern day Tower of Babel, and the Tower of Babel intentionally was taken down and fell. So I mean, like the Tower of Babel is like the everybody could speak the same language and communication was given through all. Like I think that is an analogy for like an ancient internet or something, some kind of way. And like so for me, sometimes when I think about that, I think while you have the Tower of Babel, use it for good. Like start learning things that you could use even if it weren't here. Like don't always take it for granted, because I hope it's always there, but it might not always be there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'll hit on this stuff. I will say some stuff really quickly, and then if it's okay, if you want to see a couple of charts where I can show how Eris works.
Yes.
Yeah. So I agree 100%. I think that it's pretty likely that in the distant past, I mean, I think this, and I can't prove it, but this is what I think, is that we had knowledge of the outer planets of the solar system and everything, probably tens of thousands of years ago. We probably had this information, and then we lost it for a long time, right? It's like, whether you could say it's the Younger Dryas, whatever kind of cataclysmic things have happened. I mean, we've probably had a few resets, and we could be hundreds of thousands of years old here, and in terms of civilization, and just not have the record clearly in front of us to be able to piece it together and understand it. But there was some kind of cataclysm where we lost that, and then Saturn became the protector. We shrunk down to this thing that we could handle, and Saturn was that energy for a long time. And so it's like, mentally, we're still, as a species, we're still kind of stretching and growing into this world that's beyond that, and getting that information back. So every time there's a discovery, it's an expansion of our possibilities, but it's also kind of traumatic. It brings in these things that we're kind of like, kind of reminds us maybe of the distant past, when we had this stuff and then remembering losing it, or I don't know what. I mean, it's like, but it's growing just the way a child grows,
I mean, yeah, I also feel like it's that what is that, epistemology, or where you break down the word, where it could actually be like you're remembering, you're re-putting things together, and like this is the cycle. It's happened before, it can happen again, kind of thing. Yeah, so okay, so like, yeah, show us like how you think that Eris, like the namesake in that sense, is actually doing these kind of aspects to certain things. Okay. Okay, so this is Obama.
Yeah. So we're gonna look at, this is kind of a very common thing in astrology. We look at charts of famous people because everybody knows them, and then we know them a little bit at least, so we can see how they're working. And presidents, I'm picking presidents, they're kind of become like celebrities right now because we don't have really great, movie stars and rock stars that everybody's like, in love with. Okay, so we got Obama, right? And we look down at his chart here. Eris, there's a column in a row for aspects that are forming with Eris. That's like different geometrical configurations. He's got one with Uranus that's generational that we won't really go into, but he's got one very, very outstanding one with the sun. That's a major aspect, and that's right here. He got his sun in the 6th house, and then he's got this blue line that you can trace over down to Eris in his 2nd house. So he's got one very, very soft, very harmonious aspect in his chart with Eris, which is with a personal planet, which is with the sun. So when people have that, I look at the shortcut to looking at Eris in a chart. And this is pretty valuable, I think, and pretty reliable as you look at how does this person incorporate or understand the way that they're seen by other people, and how do they use that information. That's the simplest way I could put it, and there's a lot of other facets to it, but that's the easiest way. So you can see that Obama's got this trine here to the sun. That sun is like, that's your sun sign, that's your self-conscious awareness, that's your ego. So he's got this very automatic flow of energy between Eris, a very automatic and easy flow of his ability to understand how he fits in to society and how other people see him. And, a lot of politicians, a lot of successful politicians will have strong aspects, either hard ones or soft ones with Eris, because it's a major tool one way or the other to be able to understand how other people see you. So Obama, no drama, Obama, right? I mean, whether you thought he was a good president or a bad president, he was smooth. I mean, his presidency had very few scandals, and he was able to keep himself looking good throughout his presidency.
Right.
And it's only kind of after he's been out of office that there's been some criticism, but you kind of get the sense that whatever happens, he's probably, you get to kind of feel like he's never really going to be taken fully to task for things. He's going to find a way to
kind of like the ultimate diplomat in a way too, like
yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's really well put. So let's look at Trump coming afterwards. Very, very, very different. Very different relationship with the planet.
Wow, he's got a lot of houses with nothing in them. Like,
yeah, some people do, and it's when you have a concentration, like he's got this huge concentration in that 4th quadrant, which is really interesting because that's really about how the self relates to society as a whole. So even though he has a image as being a very self-centered or petty person to a lot of people, he innately has a very strong relationship to society. I mean, he's meant to be interacting with the whole of society. That's a quick takeaway from having that.
So interesting, because I have the same birthday as Trump. And
oh, you do? That's right. How about that?
Yeah, and our charts don't look alike.
No. The only thing that's the same is probably the sun. I think that's it. I think there's nothing else that's the same.
Yeah, the sun in the 10th house. Wow.
Yeah. And he's got the sun. That's right. Actually, so 2 things. His sun in Gemini, exactly almost where yours is, and then he is also in the 10th house. Because his ascendant is late in Leo, so yours is in Virgo. It's a little bit different, but actually pretty close. So yeah, I mean, his chart has been looked at. He's got a really wild chart because it's up the sun and Uranus and the North Node all up there together.
Wasn't he born on an eclipse or something? Or
yes, yeah. So let's look here at
Eris.
His chart, right? So here's Eris, the column for Eris. Nothing over here. Over here we're going to skip that because that's not necessarily relevant here. A lot of politicians I see seem to have aspects between Neptune and Eris, so they're able to use the idealization of certain images to their advantage. But what he's really got is this one square with Mercury. And he's got a real interesting Mercury because it's forming a T-square with Eris and Neptune, right? So a square between Mercury and Neptune very often is a person who they've got a very unique relationship with reality. They're the person that is, sometimes they can be a dishonest person. Now, politicians basically lie all the time. So the fact that he would be dishonest at all or anything is in itself, that's not unusual. I mean, all these people are liars. I mean, and I don't want to sound like I'm jumping on the bandwagon and saying Trump is a horrible person or anything, because I feel like ultimately he was good in some ways and bad in others. And the reality is that he was pretty close to being a typical Republican president at the end of the day. I mean, all the fuss about him is just really, a lot of it is expressed here in Eris, because there's, it's when there's a square between Mercury and Eris, then that person's mind and the way that they're communicating, he's putting something out and he's seeing it as one thing. And the reaction coming back from other people is saying it's totally something else. So it's like, we've got the idea that the square between Neptune and Mercury is creating a kind of unreality. But then with Eris squaring it too, that means that people are constantly calling it out. And then he's kind of coming back with a real defiance, because he's got a way that he feels about himself that's totally, it ends up being very much at cross purposes to the way that a lot of other people are perceiving him. And the reality is that neither end of that is objectively correct. And that's a really important thing that I want to point out about Eris, is that the fact that he's being seen sort of in a different light by the public than perhaps he sees himself, especially in his communications and his thoughts with Mercury, doesn't necessarily mean that his critics are correct, doesn't necessarily mean that he's correct. It just means that this conflict is there. Right. And there's constantly an energy of that this has to be resolved somehow. We're trying to settle it somehow. And these different elements are jockeying for power. And I would point out that, squares create mastery, and Trump was a real master of social media. I mean, he knew how to use the internet. He was the first president who really knew how to use it. Even if he didn't know how to use a computer, he's able to understand the logic of how social media works and be able to communicate very effectively. And look what happened. They shut him down.
Yeah, I was gonna say, he knew how to use it until they took him down. But then didn't he create his own thing or something? So.
Oh, he'll come back. He'll come back one way or another. I don't know if he's going to run for president again, but he's got this square. The square creates, it's a constant tension that he is aware of. And
I'm neither a fan nor a dis-fan of basically any politicians. I've been like a politician since I was like 18. But I think that what is up with the geriatrics of our entire country are, you can't fly a Boeing 737 after the age of 65, and hell, half the people they're all like in their 80s. Like, if Trump runs again, he'll be in his 80s, just like Biden's in his 80s. Like, man, my 80-year-old grandparents could no more run a country than when they were alive.
Yeah, you got a really, really, really good point there. And
yet we just let it happen. We're just like, yeah, cool, whatever. Yeah, it's awesome. Well, it's weird.
Part of it, I can tell you what I think is causing.
Astrologically, what do you think is causing that?
Yeah. Okay. So we've got the last, not counting Obama, we had Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Trump, and Biden, all born within like 2 years or 3 years of each other.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So generationally, these people, I agree, they're getting pretty damn old, and they've got a crazy stranglehold on power.
Yeah, like that Nancy Pelosi's in her 80s, like that, like they're all in their 80s. It's just like there needs to be an age limit. I'm sorry, it's insane.
So part of what's happening now, Trump doesn't exactly have it. It's a little bit out of orb, meaning that it's not quite exact enough to to get picked up on this system here and have a line show up. But he's got Eris at about almost 7 degrees of Aries, and then Pluto over here at 10 degrees of Leo. So he's like 3.5 degrees out from having another trine, see a blue line here that would go over to Pluto. And that's kind of more or less what that generation has. George W. Bush here, you call him up. I think he's got it. Let's see if he has it. It could be wrong. But they all are kind of hovering around that aspect. And so if you think of...
Wait, what years were they all born in?
Well,
like
Bush is born in 46. I think Clinton was born in 46. Let me see. Trump, what was he here? Yeah, he's 46. Actually, Trump, I forgot, this is crazy. Trump and Clinton and George W. Bush were all born within 3 months of each other.
Whoa, that's kind of weird, right?
Yeah, 3 completely different presidencies, absolutely different personalities, but astrologically they had these aspects going on with Neptune. They got that opposition with Neptune, and they had the trine going on with Pluto, more or less, and they phased in at different degrees of exactitude. So Trump has a really tight opposition with Neptune, and I think Clinton or George W. Bush I think George W. Bush has a really tight trine of Eris with Pluto. So when Eris and Pluto are the George W. Bush is showing up?
It just left.
Okay, sorry. My bad. There we go. Okay, should be there, right? It's so this is George W. Bush. Here's Eris up here, 7 degrees of Aries, and then I think it does seem to show up. If it doesn't or does or doesn't with these aspects for these particular presidents, it's kind of on a razor's edge where it either just barely does or doesn't show up. So this Eris has got that blue line going down. Yeah, so he's got pretty much the same thing as, well, I mean, they're born very close together. So it's got almost exactly the same thing where it's a trine a few degrees out. So George W. Bush.
He's got a lot of Eris stuff.
He does have some good Eris stuff going on. A lot of politicians have this one particular one where Eris is trine the ascendant, which he has. So there's the ascendant over there. He's a Leo rising. And he's got that line that goes over to Eris. So when you get that trine the ascendant, right? Obama had that trine to his sun.
What is the trine thing? Like I guess 3 of something, but you're saying 3 other planets line up to it? Or
yeah, it just think of an equilateral triangle.
Okay, yeah.
That's what a trine is like. So on the inside, you've got 60 degrees. On the outside, you've got 120 degrees. So it's a 120 degree aspect is what it is technically. And then there's also sextile, which is that other part, is the 60 degree aspect. So trines and sextiles get these blue lines, and they basically denote smooth, easy flows of energy, which are generally positive or seen that way because they're easy. So it can give a person easy advantages. The downside is that they don't know how to deal with conflict. So, you could see the downside for Obama, for example, who had that trine with the sun to Eris. He was really had an easy, great aptitude for being able to manage his own image publicly so that people would see him in a favorable way. But he doesn't really have that ability to deal with the kind of conflict that Trump excelled in, right? And it could say theoretically, if Obama had that kind of a little bit of a rough side to him there to be able to do that, maybe he could have actually been more like a Roosevelt type president where he got things done.
Right.
Yeah, because he doesn't have much of a legacy. I mean, people are kind of discovering that it's like he came and he went and what happened. So
yeah, I mean, his legacy is that he just didn't cause a lot of media attention. I mean, it's that he did the Affordable Care Act, but that's got huge problems, right? I mean, it's like no one's really happy with that.
it's kind of got embedded the insurance industry deeper into the fabric of.
Yeah, I mean, he still had wars going on. Like he still, I mean, yeah, like there wasn't really anything particular. There was no big change thing that, yeah. But anyway, so okay, so back to the Eris thing though. Can you do it for things like I've seen other astrologers do things like for America, like they put like the Declaration of Independence, as if America itself is the person.
Okay. This is what I can do is I'm hesitant to do that because there's a bunch of different charts for the formation of America. And I'm personally, as astrologer, have been kind of skeptical about, they usually do one for the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And I feel like that I'm making it kind of an excuse, but I got a good explanation, which is that the Constitution didn't happen for like several years. And then the Constitution wasn't ratified until like 1780s. And I think that's sort of more when the actual government was more formed. There's a lot of problems in our country sort of figuring out who we are. And I think it's because we've got these different,
like our start date is a little odd. Well, I think there's a lot of countries would have a really hard date and time and start date, like
right. A lot of them have no idea when they were founded, right? I mean, yeah, England is one of the few ones I think where people know. But I do want to say some things about what you just pointed out, which is that I think that our country is kind of married to Pluto. and I'll just show you just a little bit about why I think that. And I know that people might think this is kind of bunk, but that the American century kind of lines up with the Plutonian century. I mean, the time when Pluto was the one that was furthest out, that was sort of defining the whole system, is the same time that America was at really firmly holding its preeminence in the world as sort of the dominant cultural force, the hegemon. It's the imperial force that's controlling the world.
Okay.
And I feel
so
like
now that Pluto's going away, we're not.
Yeah, I really believe that. I think that when Eris was discovered, I mean, when they started finding, it's almost like I kind of feel like Pluto was hiding these other things that were out there and wanted us to think it was the only thing that was out there. And then once we started finding the stuff that was almost as big, it's kind of going, oh shit, and then when we found Eris, it's like that really signified the turning point. And if we look at what was actually happening when Eris was discovered, it's like we were deep in those wars, the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War in 2005. We're deep in it. And it's really the way that we ran those things, getting funding. Basically, we went into debt to China during that time. And I mean, I think China's, is almost certainly going to be the preeminent power. Now, the way it holds power is going to be different. I mean, it's showing that it's operating in a different way. And I think Eris has a lot to do with that too. But I think when you look at the Great Seal, right? So that's showing up, the eagle and the pyramid.
Yeah, that's showing up.
Yeah. These are both things that have a certain kind of a resonance with Pluto, because Pluto's really about, you've got constant power concentration. It's the Big Bang, right? I mean, the Big Bang conception of the creation of the universe is something that came about really while Pluto was holding that.
I see what you're saying. Like the theory of the Big Bang came.
Yeah, that theory of the Big Bang, of having everything in the universe be concentrated in this point, and it getting so tiny and so pressurized that it has to explode, and it's exploding for billions and billions of years, right? And it's sort of really, I think, kind of comes out in this pyramid structure, having that idea that awareness and power and everything is concentrated in this one point and it radiates out from it. And I know originally that symbol didn't mean that. I mean, originally that came from,
that's like the all-seeing eye of the monad of, but that's the same kind of concept in a way. If you
yes, yeah. I mean, the monopole that idea of an imperial monopole, of a thing that's the center, that's holding power over everything, that just radiates from the center. That's a Plutonian concept. And, it's a really, 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 really powerful concept.
I
And
mean,
for a long
it's a
time,
powerful concept, except that it doesn't explain origin, because it's like, like that's what would piss me off about like Big Bang Theory. Is like, okay, but where did the point come from? Like what was the molecules that were like floating around that then exploded? Like, where did they come from? Like there can't be such thing as non-existence. So it's
right.
interesting that like it has its time, and it's like that concept like had its time, and then now it's like, all right, next.
Agree 100%. What it doesn't do is it doesn't show you cycles. It doesn't show you, that things, it just has that, it doesn't show you what came before. And, we've got, and the eagle is a Scorpio symbol for one thing. And it's kind of, both of them have a funny, it's this kind of thing that's not really necessarily intentional, but it's an energy that they got aligned with, especially at the time that Great Seal went on the dollar bill and became, the symbol of American power. But what you were just saying about the Big Bang and the limits of it, I mean, I think what's coming on now is Electric Universe, right? I mean, that's sort of the thing that seems to be gaining power. And it's not being officially recognized.
No, yeah, I have watched a bunch of the Electric Universe theory stuff, and I encourage everybody else to. It's kind of interesting, if nothing else. It's
And I think it has some correlation to Eris, but I can't quite articulate it, except that electricity is caused by it's the oscillation of the electron going back and forth between two different states. And I think Eris is a lot to do with that. It's kind of like, if you think of the scales for Libra, that symbol of the scales is they're going back and forth looking for equilibrium, but they may never find it. It's just swinging to one pole to the other. And you kind of think about, I don't know, it's that same idea of sharing, of recognizing yourself, but recognizing that there's something equal to you that's outside of yourself, and going back and forth and back and forth.
Okay, so why? So you think Eris is going to be super super important going forward to kind of it almost feels like it's like ego play, like it's kind of almost like recognizing the ego in general, which is something that I think is, especially you have things like Eckhart Tolle and like there are all kinds of things that have come up in the last 20 years that really have I mean they've even caused people to examine what that is.
Like a recognition of the ego.
Like a recognition of the ego. Like instead of, I mean, used to, I think people just like took that concept for granted, like that there is even this personality that's on your existence that you kind of construct. Like they didn't even really ever think of to examine that.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah, I mean, I remember it was technically this was before Eris was discovered, but I was using Friendster, right? Remember Friendster?
I never used it, but I remember the name of it. Yeah.
It was like the little barely, it was just the prototype of social media. It was
I remember MySpace before, and it was like,
right.
Yeah, it was like, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm older. I was using Friendster. I was already really kind of too old for Friendster at the time that it was coming on. I mean, I felt like I was a little bit older than optimum age, but that process of posting pictures, they had kind of a questionnaire, and you'd kind of answer questions and create a profile based on your answering, these different questions. And at first I felt like this is really awkward and I don't like it, but then I found I'd go back and revise it and go back and revise it and go back and revise it. And after a few months, I felt like this was really, really useful. Like I'm learning how to present myself in a way that's genuine. Like, how do I actually give people a genuine sense of who I am by using these things, so that it's just out there, and anybody who wants to engage with me in any kind of dialogue, that they know this stuff going in. It seems to kind of line up with what you just said. It's like, it's ego play, it's recognition.
Yeah.
And actually what you just said is actually really profound, because originally they were going to call it The planet was originally, I think, going to be called Leela, which is from Hindu cosmology, which is a term for cosmic play. And there's a whole thing between Krishna and his milkmaids, right? Where Krishna, you know that story, like he's got like 10,000 milkmaids or something like that.
Oh, and he can sleep with them all in one night, or he expands time to where he can have it feels like, yeah, okay, you could probably explain it better than that, but yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try. I mean, it's yeah, there's the sexual side to it, but actually in India, I think they actually emphasize this other part, which is connected with it. It's that he marries them. And he actually like goes through this whole thing where they're courted and they have a wedding and they celebrate. And it was based on the devotion of one of the milkmaids who, you know, maybe she was naive enough or something that she thought that she could be married to Krishna. And she was like, I'm in love with you and let's get married. And he said, well, the only way it's going to work is if I can do this with everybody. So that's what's fair, is to do this with everybody. I can't just do it with you. And that's a big part of Eris, is fairness, is understanding what's fair and trying to arrive at a concept of justice. And it's really connected with the exploration of ethics.
Well,
so
which is why I've heard you say that you think this era or this epoch that's coming is going to basically equalize us more, instead of having like the billionaires having 99% of the wealth. You know, it's gonna kind of at some point somewhere what's coming is there's going to be an equalization.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, I do believe so. I mean, I think for better or worse, I think that the wealth is going to that idea of, I think that this whole thing, this feeling that there's this center that's creating this absolute control over everybody, and that all the wealth is concentrated in one place. I think that that's going to fall for better or worse. I mean, I think the great thing about it is that we feel like we're kind of locked into something that doesn't feel right.
Well, yeah. even if it isn't necessarily at first just the wealth thing, even I think you kind of touched on this earlier when you were like pointing out presidents versus like movie stars and stuff. I've noticed like definitely during coronavirus, I think there's been a huge like kind of like, why are we obsessed with Hollywood? Why are we obsessed with these famous people pretending to be other people? Like, that's dumb. Like, and I feel like when you see like YouTube personalities or other things like that, it ends up kind of being like almost like we're starting to examine where we put our attention onto who. Like, why are we fascinated with certain personalities or not? You know, I've found within my own life, like, okay, being a flight attendant, like used to, when you would clean planes, there'd be People magazines everywhere, or US magazines, like we would have to throw them away like when we were at the end. And I don't hardly ever see those kind of tabloid magazines. They're out there. I see them on the grocery store everywhere, but
they've lost a lot of power.
Yeah, people have stopped buying them. People have stopped consuming that stuff in hordes. Like, I don't know how they're doing. They're obviously still in existence because they're there, but I can just tell you from my own anecdotal experience of watching people on airplanes, they have stopped consuming them, like 95% stopped consuming them.
Wow. Yeah. That's, I mean, this is, well, again, it's the Plutonian thing, right? It's, look at the old model of entertainment where you had 3 networks on television, or 4 maybe, and they're controlling everything, right? And they've got their central broadcasting and it's beaming out and we're on the other end receiving. Or you've got the studio system in Hollywood, right? The whole thing of it just being in Hollywood, having a place,
like
a physical location. Yeah, and having it have the power radiate from there, the messaging power, and having those stars, having the people that we look up to, you know, same idea. It's people have really, I mean, YouTube 2005, right? Started 2005.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's that, you know, it's you, right? You too. And I think people have embraced this. I think it's really cool. I think it's really great that people have embraced this kind of new model of celebrity, that there might be some random person who's famous for a little while and you celebrate one thing about them, but then there's thousands of other people. Or
even it's like, even if you're not into, like, I feel like people, it's like, I think YouTube is like the second biggest search engine in a way, because like people are looking up like didactically, how can I teach myself like how to change the oil in this particular car model? Like, how can I, you know, like whatever. It's like become a way to improve yourself versus like take yourself away from your own reality.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is
Yeah. No, it's, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of really great things about it. It's really, I mean, there was a reason that that Eris was found at this time, right? Is to bring, I always take it back to that, you know, and I do feel like it articulates that framework that's behind it, you know. I don't know if do you want to look at other charts, or does it matter? Or
I don't know. But well, I mean, like, so you're saying that what can Eris tell you about in your own chart? Like when you're like people, okay, I'm not very good at astrology, but what would you tell an astrologer? And then what would you tell a person who knows nothing about astrology if you were wanting to look at this one aspect of, I hate using the word aspect because I like using that word, but in astrology, I know it means something different. So
oh yeah, it means the geometry of, yeah.
The geometry. Okay, so what I'm meaning when I say that word is like this, what is the, I don't know, the personality of Eris, where it's placed within you, what can it show for you?
It's what does it tell you about how you're able to work with the way you're seen by other people?
Yeah.
Eris is it's about, you know, I think the best thing it's about in terms of a person's own experience, your own personal experience, it's how do you learn, your ability to see yourself as other people see you, right? Which for a long time has been seen as this impossibility, that you can never see yourself as the way other people see you.
Or it's like, it's not important how, you know.
There's people, yeah, there's an argument that says it's not important, but the thing is we can't really integrate as a society if that's totally devalued.
Yeah, well, there's other yous to contend with it here. Like we're not islands. So
yes, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Pluto is that old motif of Pluto. I want to say it's very, very useful for doing like internal work, like soul work, right? Like whatever you want to call it, therapeutic self work.
Reflection.
Like yeah, you're on that hero's journey going into yourself to find a more authentic understanding of yourself as an individual, as a lone person, and Pluto is really valuable. And so we had a huge acceleration of that awareness while Pluto was kind of holding court, right? While it was in charge of this system. And now we're learning this other thing, you know, which is how to work together with other people. And it's, I mean, that's very, very complex, right? I mean, finding a way to, because we know that our social order, we know that our society is you know, it's fucked. I mean,
like there's no other way to say that, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, we have a dysfunctional society. I mean, that's very, very clear, you know. And so right now, we've got Pluto and Eris are squaring with each other. That's been going on. And actually, that's been going on the whole pandemic.
Okay,
so it started.
When does that end?
it ends now. So I mean, let me rephrase that. It's the exact aspect, right? The exact 90-degree angle between Pluto and Eris, that exact square. It's doing that for the last time right now. So at midnight tonight is the last one. There's been 5.
Nice.
And the first one was in late January of 2020. So it's been the whole pandemic. This has been the aspect that's kind of been creating this bizarre social tension, right? It's like how annoying it is, like constantly to try to do things with other people, right? Whether you're going to work or having fun or anything. I mean, it's just like everything has become so jammed up and complicated. So and people are people are fighting with each other, and you know but we're moving out of that. But we'll still be feeling the effects of it for a little while longer, maybe another year. That the energy of that square, maybe half a year.
Okay.
It's caused because Pluto's the faster moving one, and Pluto's starting to pick up speed and move on. So yeah, and then it's going to change signs in a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at this point we have gotten like particularly with like the extreme arguing about like even COVID or like politics or whatever is currently going, like whatever you believe on one aspect or another. I feel like there's a point where people just get exhausted of the conflict, and eventually it has to move on. So it's
yeah, you'd think.
You would think, you would hope. I hope.
You'd think. Yeah. It's leading us to a greater awareness. I mean, it's creating mastery.
Yeah.
Squares, they create mastery. The conflict is being created for some reason.
Okay, so is there anything else about Eris that you think that people really need to like to get a good introduction of it? Is there anything you think that they really need to know?
Well, I mean, it has a reputation. This is the thing, is that there have been a lot of stabs at interpreting it. There were a lot of sort of initial interpretations of Eris as being this very negative, very dark thing, because they associated it with the goddess being, vengeful and spiteful and feeling hurt because she wasn't invited to the wedding. I really early on felt like that can't be right, because for a few different reasons. It just was ringing false.
Well, also that's just based on like what a group of scientists that named it after. It's arbitrary. I mean, like there's some cool things that end up happening to match up, but it's
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the name, I feel like the collective unconscious works through the minds of these guys when they do this stuff, even if they don't know what they're doing.
So what the name they land on does have a significance.
It does have a significance. It isn't exactly the same thing. You can't just transpose one for the other.
Okay.
But so Eris was named on purpose by the guy who was leading the team of people who discovered it, as a kind of a joke or a wry comment on the fact that it led to Pluto being demoted, and it created this reaction from the people there that they didn't want to invite Eris into the party. They didn't want to invite Eris to be a planet, right? So that Eris took revenge by swatting Pluto down and taking Pluto out, too, at the same time. So it was a comment on that, and then that kind of made me want to look at that instant, that event of the wedding, and see what's there. And then you start to really see a lot of Libran energy, a lot of Libran motifs. You've got a wedding, you've got a beauty contest, you've got a judgment, you've got Eris goes to get the apple. She goes over to the nymphs of the sunset, and the setting sun is actually the glyph for Libra, is the setting sun.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a scale, but it also looks like a setting sun, and it's meant to represent.
Yeah, I always thought it looked like a bowler hat, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it does. But it's also it's like autumnal equinox, right? Because Libra is the beginning of fall. And then looking at it from that standpoint, that Libra is really about accord and harmony. And when a Libra has a party, they want to invite everybody they know, and they want all the different types of people to show up and enjoy each other's presence and get along, right? And they want to have a fair experience. It's just that discord is the other side of that. That idea of the discord is it's one polarity of that experience. If you're looking for a chord, you're going through a period of discord to find a chord, to find, you have battles in order to find peace. Not necessarily the kind of wars that we have in our world, which is a total scam. But in your life personally, you have to fight sometimes in order to find a peace. In order that what you're looking for is something that's going to, there are good fights to have in your life.
There's struggles that you're going to go through, whether you want to or not. Yeah. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your channel, what your plans are, and then like if a person wants to do a reading with you, how would that work? And then also, he's a psychic, y'all, so that's like really cool. So tell us a little bit about that process and what you do with that in your, like how you can interpret that and how people can find you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so my Instagram right now is distance between planets. I turned the E's around and made them threes. I did do that. That's where it is right now. And my YouTube channel is the same one, distance between planets, written with the threes in place of the E's. And then you can contact me. I think the Instagram is a good way to contact me if you want to get a reading. I think that's probably the best way, right, to do it right now.
Yeah,
maybe.
but if people don't like, should I put your email in the bottom in case people don't have
I've thought about that. Yeah, I've thought about whether I want to do that or not. But yeah, why not right now? Why not? Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
So it's just this is confusing though. So I haven't thought this out very well. Is distance between planets with the E's?
With the E's.
With
Okay,
the
yeah,
E's.
I'll put it all in the
Yeah.
description for
Yeah,
everyone.
I'm not. I haven't really excelled at this aspect of.
You gotta, yeah, you gotta work
Yeah.
on your Aries. You gotta
My-
work your Eris.
Yeah, that's
social
right. Yeah,
media stuff.
my social media, ironically enough, is pretty weak. So so it's distance between planets at Gmail. That works. And yeah, I mean, as far as doing my psychic readings, it's funny. I've got a totally different group of people, for the most part, that get psychic readings from me. That's what I do the majority of the time. And the astrology people are coming in from a different thing, and occasionally they overlap. They're kind of starting to overlap more and more. It's been a little bit of a challenge for me to integrate it because my when I do the psychic things, there's really no analysis almost. You know, it's just like I'm just.
Yeah, so you said you like that's very intense for you. You go into a meditation for an hour and then
Yeah, it's I really enjoy it. I mean, I really enjoy it, and it's really fun work.
Cool. So
Yeah.
you should have a package for like if they want to get an astrology reading, if they want to get a psychic reading, and if you want to do a combo.
Oh yeah, sure. There's that. Yeah, there's that.
There should be that. I don't know.
I feel like laughing because I'm so you know, for a long time I just did absolutely nothing to promote myself at all. And the upside to that is that when people come to me, they're coming strictly from a referral from somebody else that's got
Right.
a reading, and putting no energy into it at all has created a kind of a nice vibe. The energy, vibration and energy is really nice behind that, because it's like people come to me based on whatever somebody else told them about their experience directly, and then they really want that reading when they
Right. Yeah, that's cool. I've known a couple of psychics people who work like that. Like you have to know someone who's actually used them. Otherwise, they don't have websites or anything like that. So
yeah. So for a long time, I had another job. You know, when I was in New York, I had a second job, and I had, since COVID, I've dropped that, and I'm kind of glad that I dropped that. So you know, it probably is time for me to take it a little bit more seriously from a marketing standpoint, and actually put it out there.
well, here's something. This is something.
This is awesome. Yeah. I mean, this is. I'm amazed. I don't know if it's too much babbling at the end of this or whatever, but I mean, it was really cool that you got back to me. Like it was like the light went off. Like, why don't I see if you know, Nikki wants to talk to me about this thing, because you're so good at talking to. I mean, I just want to say, I mean, you're really good at holding conversations with people who are coming from like all these different angles. I mean, like the people talking about the nubs, you know, or the unicorn, or you know, just different therapeutic experiences and stuff like that. It's just it's cool. You're able to keep it very intellectually focused no matter what it is, which I think is really, I don't know, it's a cool thing.
Cool. I thank you. I appreciate the compliment. That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something I love to do. So well, I'm going to put all your information here on how people can find you. And okay, so yeah, is there any last thing you want to say about Eris or anything before we go? Anything you can think of to tell the audience?
Yeah, I mean, if you find that you have a difficult aspect with Eris in your chart, just remember that that's probably going to lead you to a greater level of mastery or a deeper understanding of whatever it is that may be bothering you about your interrelationships with other people that's being reflected in that chart. You're probably growing into some deeper level of awareness that other people may not even have. And don't be bothered by it. You know, celebrate whatever you've got. Everything you've got in your chart is good.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that. I like that, because I think some people have this idea that, you know, they're you know, they're a certain sign, or they have all these difficult things about themselves, and they kind of become the self-fulfilling prophecy of what they think negative aspects of things.
Yeah, someone else said this. Another person who was connected with human design, Ra Uruhu, right? And he said his system, which is a form of astrology, he just said that it's really the whole purpose of doing this is being able to love yourself. You know, it's being able to see who you are and love that and love yourself. You know, that's really the point of it.
I love that. That's awesome. That's cool. All right, Val, it was so nice talking with you. We'll have to do it again sometime. And thank you so much for telling us all about Eris and everything. And yeah, we'll speak again.
It's wonderful to talk to you. Thank you very much.
All right, bye.
Bye.